3D tracking in Seneferu procedural pipeline. Before we start, let me first log into my production manager. When I log into my production manager, I will find that all the tracking tasks that are ready to start are all available in my list. The first thing I will do is that I will select the application that I'm going to use for the 3D tracking. In this case, it's 3DEqualizer. Let me also open 3DEqualizer. Then notice that we have the tracking tasks for the scenes, and we have also the tracking tasks for the shots. The reason why we have both of them are ready to start is that we may track the shots directly by relying on just on the plate, or we may track the whole scene by relying on any shot plate in addition to the survey footage or reference frame that we published before. And remember that we also published here a lens information file that describes the lens that we used for all the shots belonging to this scene in this case. So back again to this task, which is the tracking of the whole scene. In this case, we can track multiple shots, or we can just track the scene to reconstruct the set based on the survey footage, or we can utilize some of the other shots to get better coverage to the set. Then we can have better set reconstruction and more accurate solution and so on. Notice that the execution order, as suggested by Seneferu Production Manager and as planned automatically by Seneferu Project Planner, that he is recommending that you do the tracking SCN first, because the trackings are not supposed to be ready to start as long as you have tracking scene there. But I just set the tracking ready, and just to show you all the tasks in this demo. But usually the tracking tasks will not be ready to start before you have this tracking task ready. Actually, what is going to be, so let me, I will prefer to show it exactly as how you will see it in production, so you don't get confused. What is going to happen, that all of these will be assignment not ready. If I go to here, then I will see only the tracking scene tasks are ready to start. So let's get started and set the first task to current. And this will establish the connection to Seneferu Task Control and the application itself. And we will set the task to in progress. Then we will start loading dependencies. As you see, we have all the shot plates. This is not, you don't have to load all of them, of course. So you will load only what you need. The minimum thing I want here is the survey footage. And depending on my information about the shots, I found that I can track shot 2 and 6 and 11 in the same time with the survey footage, because these are providing enough coverage to the set, so we can reconstruct the set from these shots in addition to the survey footage. In the meanwhile, I will save time by having these 3 shots tracked in the same time with the scene tracking itself. So let's load dependencies. When I do load dependencies, this will load all the shot plates in addition to the survey footage. In addition to that, Seneferu Production Manager will automatically load the lens information file that we have, if you remember, that we have published in the survey footage when we ingested the survey material, or when we were ingesting the resources we have after the shooting. Because these plates doesn't have lens information, so Seneferu by default will assume that the lens information of the whole scene is used also for the shots belonging to the scene. So the production manager have also assigned the lens information file to the shot plates too, not only to the survey footage. So you will notice that if I go to the camera of this, you will notice that the lens information already applied on these shots automatically. And by the way, 3DEqualizer doesn't load the QuickTimes, so what Seneferu Production Manager will do in this case, when you are clicking on the load dependencies as you saw just now, that Seneferu will use a method to transcode and load the footage. Transcode and load is one of the methods that Seneferu Production Manager supports, which will export the QuickTime to image sequence, and will load the image sequence to 3DEqualizer. Actually, it will export the image sequence, then it will publish it to the same version of the file, and then we'll load it here. So if you want to see what happened in these shots, you will notice that, let's go to shot 2. You will notice that this is the plate, and this is the exported image sequence that Seneferu Production Manager did automatically, and he published it to the same shot version, which is in this case version 1. So if the image sequence is there, the production manager will use it. If it's not there, then the production manager will generate and publish one to load it. So these obviously, I already worked on this, and I published it. And by the way, you will see here the job brief. If there is any considerations regarding to this task, you will see it here. This is coming automatically from Seneferu, as we have informed the system that this should be told to anybody going to make this kind of processes. If this task has specific requirement from your supervisor, then you will see it in addition to this here. On the other side here, you will see any notes came on the task. Obviously, because this is a task that I already worked on and finished, you will see some notes here. Most of them are automatic notes coming from Seneferu himself. But in case if this is a new task, you will see this notes area empty. And now, since the resources or the dependencies are loaded, we can start now tracking the scene. However, in this case, I already have the scene tracked, so we will check it out in a while. On the other hand, here you have some controls here. For example, if I selected any of the resources I have and I clicked on Show Dependencies, this will show you information about all the about the selected asset, and if it has any construction history, it will show up below that. And the same for anything, or for the geometries, if you have any models or geometries imported in this setup in the dependencies. And you can also get the version of that plate, and you can set this version to another version. For example, I can let's say that we have version 2, you can set it to version 2, but of course we don't have version 2. In that case, it will be black, so you can again use versionless plate. This will give or will call the current approved version of the plate. In that case, if you ask it about the version again, it will give you version 1, which is the current approved version. But this is here, of course, because we said use versionless, it's the one that doesn't have version. If you clicked on the set version, this will be version 1. In this case, version 1 and the versionless are the same thing, because the versionless is just a symbolic link of the approved version of the asset. Anyway, this is beyond the scope of this session, so let's proceed and check out the solution that I made before for this scene. Okay, this is the tracked solution, and we have also here the reconstructed set and aligned the scene, and this has the 3 shots mentioned here already tracked, in addition to some of the survey footage that we found it suitable in this case. Notice one important thing here, that when we loaded dependencies, that Seneferu Production Manager have already set the frame range of each shot automatically based on the frame range of the shot in the edit. If you have watched the editing overview, then whatever is the current approved version of the edit, or the VFX edit in this case, the way how we used the shots or the frame range in this edit, Seneferu Production Manager, when he's loading the dependencies or when he's loading the plate of each shot, he looks into the previously made edit and checks the frame range of this shot and set it automatically for you here to avoid any user mistakes by working on shorter range than needed, or making a lot of effort to make more work than needed. This actually is managed automatically by the production manager, so you don't need to worry about anything. He will set the frame range in all types of processes and will keep everything properly in sync between everybody. So you don't need to worry about that, but when Seneferu Production Manager set the frame range, then you have to follow this frame range exactly. This frame range would also, by the way, have by default 5 frame handles, so you always have 5 frames more in the 2 head and tail when you are doing tracking or any kind of dynamic processes. So you will notice also, let's say that now we are done and we want to publish this. I will click on publish, then I will just ignore the creation of the snapshot, and if you have here any preview of the material that that you want to ingest as a preview for the 3D tracking by putting some test objects and making an image sequence render of that, you can bring it here to be published during the publish operation. If you don't, you can just click cancel. But of course, it will be needed that you create such file and publish it during the publish, because this will be used by Supervisor maybe to check the tracking easier than reopening the whole solution in 3DEqualizer. Notice here that Seneferu Production Manager raised a message. It's actually the Production Manager detected that you have tracked 3 shots here, and he's asking us to delete the tracking tasks of these shots from the system as long as we already finished that tracking, so you don't have duplication of works That's why Seneferu wants to delete these unneeded tasks. If you think that you need these tasks or you still need them to make some refinements, you can just click no. But if you know that these shots are already tracked and this is what you want and this is final, you can click on delete task. This is there is nothing to worry about this. If the task needed later, you can just recreate them. If they have any previously published file, they will not be deleted, so you don't need to worry about this. So you always, if you are not sure, click on delete tasks, don't worry. And you already made that job. So even if these are not, if these tasks are not on by you, it's still safe that you click on delete tasks because this will let the others know that these tasks are no longer needed because the job is already finished. Okay, I clicked on delete task. By the way, hopefully you understood what I mean by delete task. Delete task is, I'm talking about the task in the project database as that is assigned to somebody. Here, the publish is done, and the system wants to set the task to review. You will say yes. Then that's it. The publish now is done. If we go now to the project database, you will notice that if we go to the scenes and shots, you will notice that the 3 shots that we have tracked are now no longer having a tracking task, because the production manager have deleted this task automatically when you allowed him to do that, because now he knows that the tracking scene is already having all the tracking information needed for the camera animation refinement if we will need this task, and it has all the information needed during the lighting, which in this case will be the reconstructed set if you didn't make a task to refine it, as we are going to do in a while. And also the tracking SCN has information about the lens distortion that is needed during the render, in case if you are not going to follow the undistort method and you are going to use Seneferu's lens distortion shader that will allow you to render the footage already distorted in a way that matches the plates. So in that case, you don't need to do undistort and redistort to the footage. In case if you will do undistort, you will do it just as reference to the modeler who's going to make some set extensions or additional models to the set. But once this is done, you don't need it for the lighting or rendering, because we can use the Seneferu lens distortion shader that was done for this purpose. By going back to the tracking, let's go to the supervisor desk. This is what the supervisor will find in his review list. As we mentioned before, if you have generated for him a quick time that shows the or an image sequence that shows the solution, he can review it from here by clicking on shift and click on the icon. But because we don't have such thing, we will not be able to do that. But I just want to show you what have been published here. You will notice that this is the MEL for importing the solution in Maya. This is the lens information file. This is the Houdini Python to import or to regenerate the solution in Houdini. This is the 3DE file, and this is all the objects that you have constructed from the set inside 3DEqualizer. If there is a texture that was extracted during the tracking, it will also be published here automatically. And this is the lens distortion files that were made of each shot plate. And by the way, these distortion files will be automatically used by Seneferu lens shader during the lighting and rendering to render, as I mentioned before, to render the 3D elements with applied distortion that makes them match the back plate directly without following any undistorting or dewarping the images. So let's say now that the supervisor is satisfied with the result and he approved. Now notice that approving a task, the production manager notified me. In this case, I'm on the same disk, but if I'm another user, I will receive a notification that all these tasks are now ready to start after the approval of the tracking scene. If I go now to my tasks list, you will notice that now I have all these tracking tasks that were already assigned to me are now ready to start. In addition to that, I already received email about this. Also, the production received emails regarding to the same thing. So now I can start working on any of the shots that were not tracked. Let's, for example, do load dependencies, set it to in progress. He's always reminding you if you didn't do it, because you have to set your task in progress. This is very important because it automates a lot of things, so it's not an optional that you work on a task without setting it to in progress. So when I do that, load dependencies, as you see, automatically the production manager loaded from the tracking scene. He loaded the reconstructed set and loaded also the shot plate. If we apply image control to help us track the shot, then we can now this is not, of course, a 3D tracking tutorial, so in this case maybe we can use the alignment to align this with the camera and track the camera in an easier way by matching it to the already pre-made tracking. And by the way, when we do load dependencies now, the lens distortion and information found here are also, as mentioned before, is applied automatically by the production manager during the load on the lens used for the plate. So that's enough for now, and let's go and check now our solution to see how it is in Maya. If we go now to Maya, and let's first go to our database system, and let's say that we want to assign a modeler a task to refine the reconstructed set that we did in the tracking. Then you will see that this task is now here, which is this one. And as you see, the first ready to start task will come before any others that is needed, because in this case these tracking task may rely on this refined model. So the system wants you to track this after finishing this. And of course wants you to track this first before this, because this is actually affecting this. So because when you track scene 2, you may add some additions or more modifications to this set, because maybe the shots in this scene is making more coverage than what we already reconstructed. So the system wants you to do this first, but we are not going to follow that just for this demo, of course. Okay, so we will open this in actually Maya. I will set this task now also to in progress. Now when we do load dependencies, this will load the tracking scene solution task. Then we will find here the model that we reconstructed in the tracking scene, and we can now check also the different camera solutions for all the different shots. And the image plane. Okay. And you will notice also that the shot, each camera frame range is, let me just expand this. You will notice that each camera has the keyframes from the beginning to the end according to the tracked area. Of course, because this is a modeling task, it doesn't have a frame range, so there's nothing wrong about setting the frame range when it's a static task like this. Seneferu doesn't consider the animation, but sets the frame range to the default 1 second frame range. So there's nothing wrong about that. Okay, now you can see this. You can actually, when you do such mistake, you can click on reset. This will reset to the default frame range. If this is a dynamic task, the reset button will reset the frame range to the actual correct range that you have to follow. Okay, now these are all the scenes. Notice that the backplate that I'm seeing now is the actual plate. So now if we do the modeling based on this plate, we will have some distortion differences because this is undistorted frame, so while the viewport will not be able to apply the distortion to our 3D objects, of course. So to resolve that, before the modeler can proceed with this task, we have to make a better plate for him to start modeling according to. Because as I just said, the distorted plane will not be suitable to align objects, especially maybe for this situation it will work, but in some other situation when it requires more precision, it might not work as expected, and the distortion in the plate will make some differences around the edges with the 3D models, which will look weird, and we will not be able to tell if the model is fitting properly with the back plate or not. For this, we will go to each shot plate, and we will create a task to undistort the plate. Notice that the layer is something exactly like the plate, but the layer might be a green screen or something. It's recommended to just make it clear that this is the plate of the shot, and this is an additional layer that will be on top of the plate. And this is the undistort for the layer, in case this is layer, just to make it clear names, nothing more than that. So you can have different plate, and you can have different undistort with different subcontext, but it's better to have better naming like this. So I will create these for the 3 shots that we have. This is of course something you plan before you proceed. If the workflow that you want to follow is to have this, then you can configure the shots actually to be having the undistort task by default. When it have a tracking, then it can have also the undistort task too. Notice that I'm not doing any redistort tasks, because I'm not going to use the redistort technique. Instead, we will be doing the lighting by doing the distortion in render time, other than distorting in comp later. But of course, you can, exactly as we did the undistort, you can do the distort. Now I assign the 3 tasks to me. Notice the production manager is telling me that I have new jobs ready for me. Now I actually will go to 3DEqualizer. Let me get my production manager here, and to do that, actually, when we have the I didn't allow it to refresh actually, so let's go to 3DEqualizer. There are 2 ways actually to create the undistort image sequence. The first method, that I will not go deeper into it, is that you can just open this in Nuke and load dependencies in Nuke. This will load the plate and will load a lens distortion or lens 3DEqualizer undistort node for Nuke to undistort the frames. But of course, we don't need to do this when we want to publish to this task, because we already have this when we were doing the 3D tracking. We already have the option to run the warp 4 from 3DEqualizer to undistort the frame, or we can also have the undistort found in the latest version of 3DEqualizer in release 6. There is it's already built in 3DEqualizer, so you don't need to do that. So after I already opened here this, we will undistort the plates, and we will save them out to any temporary location actually in my sandbox. Then after we do that, because I already have this before, so I will just show how we publish them. I will just browse to the files, and here we go. This is one of them. This is scene 1, shot 2. All what you will need to do is to drag and drop this and say as new version. This now published the undistorted sequence. By shift click you can check the sequence. You can now also just give it better look and acquire an image. Okay, I will not proceed with the rest. That's enough for this one to see how we do the publish the undistorted. This is way much faster and easier than going through nuke and render out the sequence. Although Seneferu Production Manager will automate that for you, but this isn't needed for a simple job like this. So now let's go back to the modelers desk when we go to Maya, and if we are going to work in this task again now, when the modeler load dependencies this time, notice what will happen, because one of the dependencies is the undistort of this shot. I will just load this and this. Usually all the dependencies will be loaded except the shots that you don't need it for the modeling. When I do load dependencies now, what happens is that Seneferu Production Manager will load the tracking scene just normally as happened before. Then it will automatically retarget the image plane to with the undistorted sequence instead. If you go now and see from this camera, let's go here and go to the image plane, and if you see now, this is the image that is undistorted. It's coming, it was retargeted automatically. If you see here, this is when the load dependency have retargeted the plate with the undistorted according to a method called Retarget Process. The Retarget Process is one of the methods that Seneferu supports when loading dependencies. Now the image is undistorted, so notice now that the lines is perfectly following the street lines, and there is no distortion in the background. If we load it without the undistorted, then you will notice that so we go to this and notice that due to the distortion this is not aligned properly. So if the modeler wants to do something perfect to match with the plate, it will never happen, and it will be very difficult to match. So that is in case if you want to have something like this. And if you requested loading this dependency again, notice that what happened when the retarget image plane happened. Notice that we never ever have to go and browse files and open any browsers or anything. If you find that you are doing this, then make sure that you are doing something wrong. Everything should be possible without from the production manager, and every asset in the scene has to be coming from the production manager, because the production manager needs to know everything about everything that is happening, and all the versions of any asset is being used in the whole project. Notice that Seneferu's pipeline is procedural, so make sure to not break this when you are doing your task. Seneferu, or the production manager, will keep everything procedural when he's loading the assets and when publishing the work that you have done. But in the process of doing your task, you have to keep your work procedural as much as you can. Just do yourself a favor and do that, because when the team is doing their works, a lot of tasks and assets will be updated, and most probably this will update your work for some times. And when this has happened, you want your job to be updated automatically, or at least most of it to be updated automatically, rather than you go back and redo your job, or make a lot of other more efforts to fix the asset. So from the beginning, try to keep your work procedural. And I will give an example now on this. Let's load the dependencies again of this task. And as we said before, that we want the undistort and we want the tracking solution of the whole scene. Load dependencies, of course I will say yes here to set it in progress. It's very important to do it. Sometimes in this demo I'm not doing this, but in production you have to set the task to in progress when you are working on it. Don't ever work on a task when it's not in progress. So now when I loaded this, you will notice that there is a button here called for duplicating any Seneferu asset. If now I want to duplicate this object and work on it, actually I can work on it directly, of course, and modify it, but it's recommended that you, if you are going to modify an object that is coming from an incoming asset, so it's recommended that you duplicate it out and work outside the incoming asset. So the people who are working after you, or you yourself, you will be able to know what came as an input asset and what is your actual work. So what I will do, I will start by duplicating this object out using this button, of course, because this will maintain the asset. So now when this asset is updated to a different version, say that the tracking TD made a new version of this solution that has some modifications here, this model will get updated automatically. That until this point. if you deleted the history of this object, or you made anything that breaks this procedural workflow, then or you have, for example, duplicated that using the normal Maya duplicating tool, then this will break your scene. So don't ever do that, and try to avoid doing something like this. So let's do now the model. Say that we will do this, and now to keep maintaining your work procedural as much as you can. For example, if you create a model and you want to snap it to a point, then it's recommended that you do that using a constraint rather than doing it by just moving the object and constrain it. Of course, what I'm saying isn't a must thing you should do, but it's recommended. In situations you can tell if something requires this or not, but as long as you can keep building your setup procedural as much as you can. Now, after we make some modifications to the model to make it more proper and aligned better with the street, then we can now publish this version of the asset. Notice now that this model now, the Maya scene itself, all the modeling that I made here is having the construction history as it is. So this you can just write any description of the publish, and I was saying that I kept the construction history of all the modifications that I made on the model here. So now, if a new version of the tracking scene asset has been published, what will happen is that I will, most of the modifications that I made will be maintained, not 100% proper, but at least this will save you time when you are modifying the model based on a new solution of the tracking, which is something that may happen oftenly in production. Now let's go to the supervisor desk, where he's going to review this, maybe by shift clicking on the image icon, and which will open this in Pixar USD viewer, and let's say that he's satisfied, then he said approved. Now notice that approving this kind of tasks, that there are tens of tasks that depending on this task, because this is the model of the set extension, so all the shot camera animation and all the lighting shots are connected to the output of this task. So sometimes it take a little more time to get approved, because Seneferu Production Manager is going to go after everybody and see how this is affecting them, and what are the tasks that are affected by the approval of this, what are the tasks that become ready to start accordingly. So for example, here some of these tasks are assigned to me, so I received from Seneferu some notifications that about this update. So all the team will receive such emails when any update of the assets in the system has happened in a way that requires their attention. Maybe sometimes Seneferu will tell them to wait, don't work now. Sometimes will tell them that their tasks are ready, and so on, as you are going to see later in more detail in the videos related to the AI and automation of Seneferu. So that was in brief some of what you need to know about how to deal with 3D tracking and Seneferu procedural pipeline, and how and what you need to take care of and to consider when you are doing your job. The last few minutes was more for the modeling part, yes, but it's good to know that how your work in tracking is going to affect the modeler, exactly as how the modeler who's going to do such kind of set extension has to know how his work is going to be affected by the 3D tracking. So that's it for now. In the next video I will proceed with talking more about modeling in Seneferu pipeline.